Welcome back, guys. I've got Luke here again. We are going to be talking about Luke's approach to training and kind of break it into kind of two separate components, structure and function, and what we can do while we're currently in lockdown. So Luke, take it over, explain the kind of, concept and talk about, all things structure and function training.
Sweet. So structural and functional. We'll start off with structural. The way that I kind of see that is this kind of training focused on changing limitation specific structures on your physiology, basically. So those kind of structures that we want to bring up could be, the cardiac strength, this kind of delivery of oxygen to the muscle. So cardiac strength in the heart, respiratory volume, that kind of thing. And then utilization. So looking at mitochondrial density and that sort of thing. And then maybe even hypertrophy and muscle mass there. It's kind of these base building blocks that you want to get built that are nice and strong before then building in the functional stuff that's kind of sport specific. So within CrossFit, that might be a certain skill, might be gymnastics, it might be that kind of muscular endurance and developing that as sort of this functional side of things. And with lockdown, the way that I sort of see my training going anyway is taking this as a big old opportunity to take a step back, have a look at myself, my physiology, kind of limiting factors that I've learned from training and even from testing and stuff like that, and think, okay, cool, there's a structural limit in there. I'm going to take the time that I've been given here to keep it simple, to keep it consistent, and bring that limiter up and potentially build in some functional stuff on top as well.
Yeah, because at the moment, we potentially people are limited with the equipment that they can do, or they have with the type of exercise that they can do. So often this is more skill based, more specific stuff, such as gymnastics, such as even kind of a Olympic weightlifting, is really challenging to do. But we post about tell me what I can do rather than what I can't do, and working on structural. So we don't mean like biomechanics or anything like that. We're talking about like the physiology, right?
Yeah.
So you can do and work on these types of things regardless of where you are and what we're doing. So we're talking about kind of improving structural function. Like, okay, give me a typical kind of week of how I can potentially kind of structure my training to improve my structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that total sense. So in terms of keeping it nice and simple, because simplicity is key, right, with everything. Say kind of, that some structural limiters for you are your cardiac strength, and maybe even this like mitochondrial efficiency of this oxygen delivery. We've talked before about low continuous cardio and high intensity interval training, both being things that can really improve those physiological things, those structures. So the way that I would probably structure it there is essentially break it up and kind of do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, long, low, continuous cardio. Okay, Tuesday and Thursday, maybe some repeated high intensity interval training, keeping things super simple and potentially just finding a hill, sprinting up and down, putting some rest in there and keeping it simple, basically. And this is kind of what we mean about that structure and removing the sort of functional aspects. So am I working on a skill there? No. Am I specifically working on strength there? No. But am I going to get these structural benefits from improving my cardiac strength, improving my respiratory volume, and improving that kind of mitochondrial density, biogenesis there, and really kind of going to reap the rewards from that when I return to the gym, and I can kind of keep adding that functional stuff in.
Yeah. So there's a massive carryover, right? Like, even though, we're not doing effectively like the movement of a gymnastics or a lift or of a workout, there's going to be a carryover because we're building the machinery, basically, that, the physiology. Is that correct?
Exactly that. It's kind of, you can to use that kind of machine analogy, I'm going to use Robot Wars, which is just an analogy that pops into my head. I love that show, Robot Wars. Yeah. And essentially what we're going to sort of do here with Robot Wars is we're going to build the build the sort of capacity of that robot. So in Robot Wars, the robot that wins is the last one standing. So we're going to build that capacity, and then we're going to look to add sort of the bonus stuff, the maneuvers, all that functional stuff on top of it. But the robot that works the best is going to win ultimately. And so it's a case of, hey, bringing that up and then adding everything on top of that once that kind of base is built.
Yeah, perfect. Because what I see in class when we go into kind of a more maybe higher skill element or award, what we want potentially for us to fail or to not be able to kind of push harder from a skill point of view, from a functional point of view, as opposed to our heart rate gets jacked up in the first, like 2-3 minutes, or we have a really poor kind of like underlying, like you say, capacity physiology, that we just really struggle to, recover in between kind of workouts or in between movements, and so even though we're not training this specifically, this is going to be a massive carryover. This is something that when we talk about aerobic capacity, you hear these people talk about this all the time. Like, this is what we're kind of talking about, like building that foundation, that baseline, so that it can transfer into workouts, into competitions, into, other areas where you maybe don't really think about it. Like weightlifting is a massive thing, right? Like, if you can have a nice doing this stuff, even if you're a lifter, potentially could help improve your weightlifting, because if you're doing maybe 2s and 3s, in between this thing, your body's going to have the right kind of like physiology to be able to recover quickly. Yeah. Am I talking sense, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
Yeah, there's the crossover to everything really in terms of building that structure, and that's kind of what we're talking about. And then once that structure is built, and obviously we've got to always put these things into context. So in terms of that capacity, as you've said, a weightlifter's capacity is never going to be as big as, say, a marathon runner or an endurance athlete there, but they still need that base before kind of moving over to the functional stuff. And in terms of structural training here, we've talked a lot about kind of capacity, cardiac strength, and that, but a weightlifter, in terms of the structure there, just this muscle hypertrophy, this muscle mass, and having that is almost a bit of a structural limiter there. And the reason that we kind of haven't necessarily talked about that now is obviously with lockdown, it's going to be a bit harder for weightlifters to kind of hammer that hypertrophy effectively. Not to say it's not possible, it's just going to be harder, and it's going to be easier to look at the aerobic structural limiters as opposed to that kind of strength structural limiters as well.
Yeah, you mentioned in there earlier about if your limiter is oxygen delivery, certain things, without doing you do the Panoe testing, Moxy testing. Like, how do people know that if you can't get access to you and get a testing? Like, how do people know that? How do people know if that's my limiter?
It's a tough one ultimately, but it's about listening to kind of your body and identifying kind of the types of training that you're good at as well. So if you kind of know that in a long, slow workout, you're going to sandbag about 15 minutes, then hey, oxygen consumption and sustained kind of periods there is probably going to be a bit of a limiter. So hey, what are you going to benefit from? Doing long, continuous cardio to build that base. And then on the flip side, if you kind of struggle to get your heart rate to what its max can be, there's going to be an issue there, sort of with CNS drive as well. But in terms of recovery after interval training, that stroke volume might not be as high as it could be. You might not be able to pump blood around the body as efficiently as you can. And so focusing on kind of interval training to build the strength of that heart could really be beneficial there. So it's a case of taking a step back, identifying patterns within kind of your training as to when you sandbag, or if you can't, find repeat intervals. And it's important to put that into context of kind of nutrition and stuff like that as well, because obviously it could just be a one-off sort of thing where you've not fueled well enough and I can struggle. But if you're consistently struggling to kind of recover from those sort of repeat intervals, it's a case of, hey, maybe I'll benefit from doing more of those, build that sort of limiter that is that cardiac output, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that is the hardest thing to do, of being aware. Like, we talk a lot about clients, being aware, put it in the context. So, are you always hungry after lunch? Are you always hungry after dinner? Do you find that you go on a rower and, you literally do 15 calories and your heart rate's through the roof? Like, these are the things that you need to be aware of, guys. And the hardest thing is then to do that, because you don't want to do it because it's hard. But kind of as we spoke about in previous videos, you need to just kind of be continuous. Like, it will get easier, and there will be times when sessions are tough, but it's like being aware of that. If it's a regular thing, then you can put an intervention in to kind of help that. So it is about committing to the process. Aerobic capacity doesn't get built in kind of 2-3 sessions, neither does kind of like high intensity or the stroke volume side of things. But we have the opportunity, I think, in lockdown, guys, and that's what these kind of series of videos is about. Just kind of helping you to kind of have a bit of focus, and as Luke said, that continuous training is the most important thing, and then maybe having a bit of a structure in your week to be able to kind of like hit the different benefits of kind of low continuous training, hitting the benefits of high intensity training, and then you're going to build that structure. So then when you go back into the gym, eventually we have a nice foundation, and we can get all of these skill based stuff and more functional things kind of back quite quickly.
Yeah.
Cool.
as you know, you kind of alluded to there with regards to asking about, you know, hey, how do we know these functions as well? In this sort of period anyway, you're not going to be as well educated in terms of what is your structural limiter. You'll have an educated guess based on kind of the past, like we've said there, and the long-term issues that you face. But I'm probably going to be hugely biased here, but in terms of actually looking at, you know, hey, how's my cardiac system? How's my respiratory system? How efficient am I at using the oxygen? Metabolic testing, and actually kind of dial in with that stuff. I think once you get to a point where you're not necessarily sure as to what you need to improve next, it's going to be crucial. It's going to be absolutely crucial. So it's like, if there's glaring stuff that you think, yeah, I'm rubbish at the longer stuff, fantastic, focus on it. And then if you bring that up, okay, cool, what's the next limiter? I'm not really sure. Find out, and you can do that with this testing, and diving into that, right?
Yeah, like you say, there's an awareness that's going to help you at the start. But then if you're just guessing all the time, as we say, if you're not testing, you're guessing. There does come that kind of tipping point, doesn't there, where, you know, it's almost a requirement to kind of really dial it in. Plus, I think it's a streamlined, you know, avenue to kind of getting, you know, what works for you. You know, that's what you know, we're going to be rolling out, definitely kind of using Luke to kind of do the PNOE testing and the Moxy, which we're going to have some more details about on future posts. But at the start, whilst we're in this and we don't have the opportunity to do some testing, you know, that awareness and structuring your week to hit, you know, everything, I think is going to be a fantastic way for everyone to approach it. Fantastic stuff, mate. Anything you want to wrap up with, or are you all good?
No, just kind of that common theme of consistency, and it's a pretty rubbish situation that we're in, but hey, train. And if you don't want to get bogged down with, you know, oh, do I need to improve this? Do I need to improve that? Then just train.
Yeah.
As we've said all the way through, that kind of chronic training is going to really bring some benefits as well. So even if you don't want to, you know, worry about structural and functional training, and you just want to do what's fun, move, good, great. But yeah, if you want to get the benefits from the performance side of thing, then start looking at those limiters and the different type of training there.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Thanks for listening, guys. As always, pop any comments in below. Reach out to Luke or myself if you need any further guidance on nutrition coaching, nutrition plans. And once we get out of lockdown, then we can be rolling out the testing side of things as well. So you know, stay tuned for that. Luke, thank you very much, buddy. Talk soon.
Always a pleasure.